when you really get to the bottom of what I think is motivating postmodernism, I think it's a hunger, it's a desire for justice, right? You hear people talk about systemic injustice. You hear people hungering for justice, for fair, equal society, for, I think, the way I would interpret it, and I think if I frame it this way, I find that people who identify as postmodernists agree that they want people's dignity to be recognized, right? For people not to be excluded, for people not to be oppressed, right? All those things I think are driving. So the idea is, the concern is that certain systems, whether they're social systems or intellectual systems or scientific systems, justify some form of systemic injustice. And so we have to critique the whole system in order to resolve the problem of injustice. So I think when you get to the bottom of it, when it's this hunger, this desire for justice, it seems like that's a good thing, right? That the hunger for justice is something, I think is part of the human condition. We all hunger for justice. I think that was part of my own struggle with the faith, was reconciling this problem of suffering and why injustice seems to happen in the world. The problem, I think, with postmodernism is that the very things that drive it, the very ethic, the ethos underneath it, this desire for truth, this desire for justice, doesn't have a foundation, because the whole purpose of postmodernism is to question foundationalism. And so you inevitably, what you fall into is a kind of moral or epistemological relativism. And when you do that, then I think this is where the appeal to Nietzsche comes in, which you see, I think, especially in Michel Foucault, the French postmodern thinker, where truth really is just about the pursuit of power, right? And people's systems of knowledge are really ways of justifying their own power and their oppression of other groups. And if that's all systems of knowledge are, then you don't have to, then there's, why even bother to try to know what the truth is? You have to just decide what the truth is, and then, basically seek ways to coerce people to adopt that truth, rather than appealing to reason or evidence. Once things go down that road, if truth is merely power, then you're no longer in pursuit of a transcendent truth. You just adopt what you believe is a system of social justice, and then use totalitarianism as a way of forcing everybody to adopt your particular brand of morality. And the problem with that is that is the ultimate and most heinous form of oppression. So what ends up happening is postmodernism, by adopting this kind of foundationalism and relativism, ends up becoming the very thing that it's trying to overcome. I find that two things can be persuasive sometimes. One is love, right? So I can say God is love, or even without talking about God, do you believe in a kind of agapic love? Not like, I'm not talking about romantic love, right? Which is a kind of attachment, romantic attachment to a person. Not even really friendship, but this ability to love an enemy, right? And I find that often people who are postmodernists will say yes. That in a certain sense, that's an ethic they can adopt. If you can tap into that, then you can say, well, what makes agapic love possible? Because it doesn't make sense from a purely biological perspective. It doesn't make sense from a social constructionist perspective. Because if everything I learn is because some top-down person in power has convinced me of it, then why would it be possible for anybody who's in power or somebody who's privileged? Like the idea of, like, if you're in a position of privilege, then you should sacrifice that privilege in order to liberate somebody who doesn't have that power, so they can be equal to you. Why would you want to do that? If you're self-centered, if ultimately life is about power, that would be the complete opposite of what you'd want to do. You'd want to assert your power and oppress those who are less than you, so that you can maintain your power and assert your truth. Why would you want to lower yourself and sacrifice what's good for you for another person? And so it seems to me that somebody who makes an argument for social justice without acknowledging the reality or the possibility of an agapic love, the possibility of willing the good of the other, right, as Aquinas would say, has no grounds for their moral claims. So I think that's I find that stops people in their track and go, yeah, I guess you've got something there. So the way I've talked about it is there's a hermeneutics of suspicion that questions everything. But I think but beneath that hermeneutics of suspicion is a hermeneutics of love, is this desire to liberate people, to be for the other, and to free the other, I would argue, so that they can free them, not merely to be free of constraints, which Isaiah Berlin would call negative liberty, but in the service of the good, right? To live, which is ultimately God, right? To be liberated, to be united with our Creator. That's what our deepest hunger is, including the postmodernist. I think underneath it all is this desire for that hunger for God.